At 7:10 on a cold Tuesday morning, two men in the same neighborhood opened their front doors to begin the day. Both were 74. Both had gray hair, stiff fingers, and a history of long years, hard work, family stress, and silent worry. But the resemblance ended there. One walked down his front steps with a steady spine, a grocery bag in one hand, and a purpose in his stride, as if age had touched him without taking him. The other paused at the railing, breathing harder than he expected, knees shaking under a body that suddenly felt older than the calendar said it should. One was still living inside his strength. The other was beginning to live inside his decline. And that is the truth many families discover too late. Growing older does not happen the same way for everyone. After 70, some people still move, think, laugh, lift, recover, and live with force. Others seem to weaken all at once, as if a hidden switch has been flipped. But that switch is rarely sudden. It is usually built over years through habits, movement, food, sleep, stress, illness, social life, and environment. Healthy aging is less about the number of birthdays and more about functional ability, the capacity to keep doing what matters in daily life. Regular physical activity, balanced eating patterns, and supportive physical and social environments all help preserve that ability as people age. The stronger of the two men was named Elias. The weaker one was named Martin. They were fictional in name, but real in every way that matters. Because versions of them exist in every city, every apartment building, every quiet street where curtains open before sunrise. Elias did not look extraordinary. He was not a former athlete. He did not have the body of a movie star or the energy of a man trying to prove something. What he had was rhythm. For years, he had walked most days, done simple strength exercises with stubborn consistency, carried his own bags when he could, stood up without using his hands when possible, stretched while the coffee brewed, and treated movement as part of life instead of a separate event. Martin, by contrast, had slowly drifted into stillness. He sat more. He told himself he was conserving energy. He stopped taking longer walks because his legs felt weaker, but his legs grew weaker because he stopped taking longer walks. He became cautious, then sedentary, then fragile. That pattern is not rare. Age-related muscle loss, often called sarcopenia, can gradually reduce strength, mobility, and the ability to handle ordinary tasks, and that loss is linked to falls, reduced independence, and faster physical decline. Mayo Clinic Press Plus to Mayo Clinic Plus to https://mcpress.mayoclinic.org/healthyaging. How men can maintain muscle after age -55. UTM_source equals chatgpt.com. People often talk about aging as though it were one solid wall everyone eventually hits. It is not. It is more like a series of doors. The first door is subtle, taking the elevator more often than the stairs. The second is harder to notice, getting out of a chair with a small grunt, then a push, then both hands pressing down. The third is more serious, avoiding errands because carrying things feels tiring. By the time someone recognizes the fourth door, fear of falling, fear of walking too far, fear of not being able to get back up, much strength has already been lost. Elias had been opening different doors all along. He chose the door of practice. Martin chose the door of postponement. Neither man meant to create his future, but both did. Research and public health guidance keep landing on the same point. Older adults benefit not from one magic exercise, but from a mix of aerobic activity, muscle strengthening work, and balance training. These together help maintain mobility, bone health, coordination, independence, and confidence. It is also not too late after 70. The evidence-backed guidance from a National Institute on Aging emphasizes that older adults can still gain meaningful benefits from activity even when starting later in life. Martin did not wake up one day and decide to become weak. That is what makes decline so dangerous. It rarely announces itself with drums. It enters through convenience. A chair becomes a base camp. A television becomes company. A car becomes the answer to distances once walked. The body, always listening, begins to adapt to lower demand. Muscles that are not challenged begin to shrink. Balance that is not practiced becomes unreliable. Endurance that is not used becomes expensive. Even mood can change. Because the line between physical decline and emotional withdrawal is thinner than many people realize. When the body feels unstable, the world starts to feel threatening. Outings become optional. Social events become tiring. Invitations become pressure. Over time, weakness is no longer just in the legs, it enters identity. A person no longer says, "I'm just resting today." They begin to think, "I'm not the kind of person who can do that anymore." Meanwhile, regular physical activity in older adults is associated with better sleep, lower anxiety, lower blood pressure, better balance, stronger bones and muscles, reduced fall risk, and a greater ability to live independently for longer. Elias protected himself in a different way, not with perfection, but with repetition. He did not always feel motivated. He was not immune to aches. Some mornings his shoulders felt tight, and some evenings his lower back argued with him. But he kept a pact with his future self. He understood something many younger people ignore and many older people learn too late. The body rewards use. If you ask a little of it, it usually gives a little back. If you stop asking, it stops preparing. So, Elias kept asking. He lifted light weights in the living room. He stood on one foot near the kitchen counter to challenge balance. He walked even when the weather made excuses easy. He gardened, carried laundry, reached overhead, bent down carefully, and turned ordinary chores into small acts of preservation. That did not make him immune to aging. It made him resistant to unnecessary decline. Strength training research supported by the National Institute on Aging has found benefits for older adults that include maintaining muscle mass, improving mobility, and extending their healthy years of life. And Mayo Clinic reporting on resistance training notes that meaningful muscle gains are still possible well after age 70. But strength after 70 is not built by exercise alone. Food matters, though not in the glamorous way social media sells it. The older body is less forgiving of neglect. A balanced diet stops being a noble idea and becomes structural support. Enough nourishment helps maintain energy, function, and resilience. Too little food, too little protein containing nourishment overall, or a pattern built around convenience rather than quality can leave an older adult lighter on the scale, but weaker in their frame. Elias ate simply, not perfectly, eggs, beans, fish when he could, fruit that needed to be peeled. Vegetables he could point to by name, soups that actually contain food instead of just flavor, and enough regular meals to avoid drifting through the day unstuffed. Martin often skipped one meal, then overate later, then told himself appetite was naturally lower at his age. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was fatigue disguised as habit. The broader health guidance is clear that maintaining healthy behaviors throughout life, especially balanced eating and regular physical activity, helps reduce the risk of chronic disease, maintain physical and mental capacity, and delay care dependency in older age. Sleep also drew a quiet line between the two men. Elias respected sleep as restoration. Martin treated it as something that either happened or did not, with no connection to the rest of his life. Yet poor sleep changes behavior the next day. It makes movement feel harder, patience shorter, and cravings louder. It turns exercise into negotiation and simple tasks into irritation. Over months, those small changes compound. One bad night is survivable. A life arranged around poor sleep slowly steals momentum. Elias kept consistent hours, limited the chaos of late evenings, and understood that rest was not laziness, but recovery. Martin fell asleep in the chair, woke at strange hours, and dragged the next day behind him like a heavy coat. Public health guidance for older adults now explicitly notes that even a single session of moderate to vigorous physical activity can improve sleep, while regular activity supports broader physical and mental health. That matters because sleep and strength often feed each other. The better you move, the better you rest. The better you rest, the more capable you feel to move again. Then there is the factor people underestimate because it is less visible than a cane or a pill bottle environment. Elias lived in a home arranged for movement, not a gym, not a laboratory, just a life that asked something of him. He had a reason to go outside. He knew neighbors by name. He walked to small places instead of outsourcing every errand. He had shelves that required reaching, plants that needed tending, and a social rhythm that prevented him from disappearing into isolation. Martin's world had grown smaller. His home became safer in theory, but more restrictive in practice. He kept things close so he would not have to get up often. He said no to invitations because he felt tired, then felt more tired because he said no. The World Health Organization emphasizes that healthy aging is shaped not only by the person, but also by their physical and social environments, which can either create barriers or support the ability to remain active, connected, mobile, and engaged. A body can weaken faster when life stops asking it to participate. Illness, of course, is real. Some seniors weaken quickly because they are fighting more than age. A body can weaken faster when life stops asking it to participate. Illness, of course, is real. Some seniors weaken quickly because they are fighting more than age. Chronic pain, heart disease, lung disease, arthritis, diabetes, depression, medication side effects, and recovery from surgery can all change what is possible. This is where shallow advice becomes cruel. Not every 74-year-old can simply push harder, but even here, the story is not hopeless. Many older adults with chronic conditions can still benefit from moderate physical activity, especially when they build up gradually and work with a clinician on a safe plan. The goal is not to pretend limitations do not exist. The goal is to prevent limitations from expanding faster than they must. Elias understood adaptation. When one knee flared up, he adjusted pace, route, and movement type. But he did not surrender the identity of being active. Martin often interpreted any setback as a final verdict. A sore back became proof he should stay. In bed more, a week of fatigue became a reason to stop trying altogether. One man saw obstacles as instructions. The other saw them as endings. National Institute on Aging +1 https://www.nia.nih Gov. Health, Exercise and Physical Activity, Exercising Chronic Conditions, _source equals checked. The difference between staying strong and weakening fast after 70 often comes down to what happens during ordinary hours no one applauds. The morning sit to stand, the decision to cook instead of snack, the second lap around the block, the phone call answered instead of ignored, the refusal to let one bad day become a bad month. Elias never built his strength in a dramatic breakthrough moment. He built it in thousands of overlooked choices. Martin never lost his strength in one catastrophe. He lost it in 1,000 quiet surrenders that felt reasonable at the time. That is why families are often stunned. They think decline appeared suddenly, when in truth it had been rehearsing in silence for years. The body after 70 still listens. It listens to movement and immobility, nourishment and neglect, challenge and retreat, engagement and withdrawal. It does not respond instantly, but it responds faithfully. One afternoon, both men received the same task without planning for it. Their apartment building's elevator broke. Groceries had to be carried up 2 flights of stairs. Elias took 2 bags, paused once, and finished the climb. His heart beat faster, but the job got done. Martin stood at the bottom, looking upward with dread. It was not only the stairs he feared, it was the exposure, the public revelation that ordinary life had become more than his body could comfortably manage. That is one of the deepest humiliations of rapid aging, not simply pain, but the shrinking of one's world under the gaze of others. Elias did not avoid that moment because he was lucky. He had been training for it all year without naming it. Every walk had been rehearsal. Every squat to the chair had been rehearsal. Every stretch, every balance drill, every grocery carried instead of dragged had been rehearsal. Older adults who keep moving are often not working out in the glamorous sense. They are preserving options. They are keeping tomorrow negotiable later that week. Martin missed a social lunch because he felt tired and unsteady. Elias went, laughed too loudly, and stayed longer than planned. That small contrast matters more than it first appears. Social connection is not decorative. It can influence routine, motivation, emotional resilience, and whether a person continues participating in life. A strong senior is not necessarily the one with the best genetics or the fewest diagnoses. Vary. Often, it is the one who still has reasons to get dressed, leave the house, answer messages, show up, and remain useful to someone beyond themselves. Purpose can act like a bridge between physical effort and emotional endurance. When a person believes they are still needed, they often protect their capacity more fiercely. When they feel forgotten, decline can accelerate because there seems to be less worth preserving. Healthy aging, as framed by WHO, includes the ability to meet needs, stay mobile, maintain relationships, and continue doing what one has reason to value. This does not mean blame belongs to every person who weakens. Some people do everything right and still face hard physical decline. Genetics matter. Disease matters. Access to care matters. Income matters. Safety matters. Loneliness matters. A person cannot deadlift their way out of every diagnosis or walk their way out of every structural disadvantage. But the larger truth still stands in many cases. The gap between robust aging and rapid weakening is widened by habits that seem harmless until they become decisive: inactivity, isolation, poor sleep, undereating or poor quality eating, fear of movement, waiting too long to rebuild, strength, accepting instability as normal for my age instead of treating it as a warning sign. Those are not minor details. They are the architecture of either resilience or decline. By the end of winter, Elias was not younger. He was simply still available to his own life. He could carry, bend, walk, recover, remember, visit, laugh, and adapt. Martin, meanwhile, had begun physical therapy after a near fall in the bathroom frightened him more than he admitted. The good news was that his story was not over. That may be the most important lesson of all. Weakening fast after 70 is not always a permanent sentence. It is often a signal, a harsh one, yes, but still a signal. The body can respond when given safe challenge, structure, better rest, better nutrition and support, not overnight, not magically, but meaningfully. Public health and aging guidance consistently repeats the hopeful part that people ignore. Because it sounds too simple, it is never too late to start moving more, building strength, improving balance, and protecting function. So why do some seniors stay strong after 70 while others weaken fast? Not because one group has escaped aging, not because one group is invincible. They stay strong because strength is practiced before it is tested, because muscle is used before it is urgently needed, because balance is trained before a stumble becomes a fracture, because sleep is protected before exhaustion becomes a lifestyle, because meals nourish instead of merely fill, because purpose survives retirement, because connection survives loss, because Activity remains part of identity because they keep answering the body when it asks quietly and repeatedly, should I maintain this ability or let it go? After 70, the question is being asked every week, sometimes every day, and the answer, given in habits rather than words, shapes everything that follows.